Humanity had grown cautious in its prosperity. After centuries of internal conflict, Earth's nations were unified under the Accord, a fragile but enduring peace. Advanced technology enabled interstellar exploration, yet the fear of alien hostility tempered humanity's curiosity. Still, Earth's leaders believed in vigilance, maintaining a network of deep space communication arrays to monitor potential threats. Dr. Elena Morgan, head of Earth's Communications Analysis Division, spent her days sifting through endless streams of cosmic noise. The vastness of space often felt eerily silent, but on a cold December morning, the silence was shattered. "Dr. Morgan, you need to see this." The voice of her assistant, trembling with urgency, snapped her out of her routine. She hurried to the main console. On the screen was a transmission unlike any she had ever encountered. The broadcast was raw and harrowing, a montage of suffering. A peaceful alien species, fragile and bird-like, was shown pleading for mercy as monstrous figures tore through their civilization. Cities were reduced to ash under unrelenting bombardments, and desperate cries for help echoed across the cosmos. "Loop it," Dr. Morgan ordered, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. The team replayed the footage, dissecting its layers. The visuals were horrifyingly clear, the audio heart-wrenchingly vivid. It wasn't just a cry for help. It was a condemnation. As the hours passed, the broadcast spread beyond the confines of the lab. Government officials received encrypted copies. News outlets picked up leaked fragments, and soon, it was everywhere. The images burned into humanity's collective consciousness, igniting a fire of rage. Captain Darius Kane, a decorated military strategist, was summoned to the Accord's Emergency Council meeting the following evening. Kane was a man of action, his calm demeanor masking a readiness for war. As the council deliberated, he leaned forward, addressing the room with unflinching conviction. "This is not a plea for assistance," Kane said, gesturing to the looping footage projected behind him. "This is evidence of a crime against life itself. If we ignore this, we are complicit." The council members murmured among themselves. "Do we even know who sent this?" one of them asked. Dr. Morgan stood, her usually calm voice now tinged with urgency. "We're working to trace its origin, but the brutality depicted here is undeniable. These perpetrators won't stop at one species. They'll come for others. They'll come for us." Outside the council chambers, the reaction was no less intense. Protests erupted worldwide, demanding swift retaliation. Artists painted murals of the victimized aliens, their mournful eyes staring into humanity's soul. Religious leaders preached unity against evil. Social media exploded with calls to action, some rational, others bloodthirsty. By the end of the week, the Accord made its decision. Humanity would act. The nations of Earth, so long divided, now moved with a singular purpose. Preparations began for an unprecedented military campaign. Back in her lab, Dr. Morgan stared at the endless loops of suffering on her screen. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The transmission was almost too perfectly crafted to evoke outrage. But her doubts were drowned by the tide of humanity's wrath. As the First Fleet prepared to depart, Captain Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute. His gaze was fixed on the stars, his jaw set. "We won't let this stand," he said to his crew. "Not on our watch." In that moment, humanity's darkest wrath awakened. The skies above Earth turned into a flurry of activity as humanity's war machine came to life. Ships that had once been designed for exploration and defense were refitted with weapons of devastating power. Massive orbital shipyards worked around the clock, producing vessels and armaments in quantities unseen since the Unification Wars. The fleet of Earth was no longer a symbol of deterrence. It was now a spear aimed at the heart of a new enemy. Captain Darius Kane paced the bridge of the Resolute, the flagship of Earth's growing armada. He exuded a calm confidence, his steely gaze never betraying the weight of the decisions before him. Around him, officers and technicians operated with clockwork precision, their loyalty and resolve mirroring his own. "We've received new orders," his first officer, Commander Halley, announced. "High Command wants us to strike a Zykar outpost in the Altar system. Intelligence confirms it's one of their primary supply hubs. Kane nodded. Good. Let's make sure the first blow counts. The Zykar Dominion had been identified as the perpetrators of the atrocities in the broadcast. Dr. Elena Morgan's analysis had traced the signal's origin to a sector deep within Zykar territory. The Dominion's history, once a distant rumor, was now a chilling reality. A race known for its conquest, brutality, and disregard for life. Dr. Morgan, however, remained uneasy. As she worked in her lab aboard the Resolute, piecing together fragments of data from the broadcast, a nagging thought clawed at her mind. The Zykar were cruel, but the broadcast's timing and content felt deliberate, almost orchestrated. She'd raised her concerns with high command, but they were dismissed as overanalysis. The mission was clear. Humanity would deliver justice, and no delay would be tolerated. The Resolute and its fleet emerged from hyperspace above the barren, cratered surface of the Altar system's second moon. The Zykar outpost was visible on the scanners, an intricate network of fortifications and supply depots. Kane stood at the tactical display, his voice cold and measured. All ships prepare for engagement. Fighters launch on my command. Ground assault units stand by for deployment. The first volley came from the Zykar. Plasma beams streaked through the void, slamming into Earth's shields. Kane barely flinched. Return fire, he commanded. The ensuing battle was a symphony of destruction. Earth's fleet, though untested, proved formidable. Human engineers had designed their ships with efficiency and adaptability, and their crews fought with an intensity fueled by anger and righteousness. Under Kane's direction, the fleet outmaneuvered the Zykar defenses, systematically dismantling their stronghold. On the surface, ground forces advanced with surgical precision. The Zykar defenders fought fiercely, but they were unprepared for the overwhelming force humanity brought to bear. The outpost fell within hours, leaving behind little more than smoldering wreckage. Back aboard the Resolute, Kane surveyed the aftermath. His officers cheered, celebrating their first victory. But Kane's expression remained stoic. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We've sent a message. Now we see how they respond." In her lab, Dr. Morgan watched the footage of the battle, her unease growing. Something about the Zykar's response felt off. Their defenses were inadequate for such a critical outpost, their resistance too disorganized. It was almost as if they hadn't expected the attack, or had wanted it to happen. That night, as the fleet prepared for its next move, Morgan stared at the endless stars outside her window, the unanswered questions gnawing at her resolve. The victories came quickly, each one more brutal than the last. Humanity's fleet moved with unrelenting efficiency, leaving Zykar colonies in ruin. Entire cities were vaporized, their populations exterminated with a cold precision that mirrored the atrocities in the broadcast. What had begun as a mission of justice had turned into something darker, an unstoppable campaign of vengeance. Captain Darius Kane stood at the helm of the Resolute, the fire of righteous fury still burning in his eyes. Every victory brought cheers from his crew, but Kane felt no satisfaction, only the unyielding weight of responsibility. "This is what they deserve," he told himself over and over, as the reports of civilian casualties mounted. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Morgan's unease had transformed into outright dread. In her lab, she worked tirelessly, reanalyzing the broadcast that had ignited this war. The more she dug, the more anomalies she found. The signal's encoding suggested layers of manipulation, its origins more obfuscated than she'd initially realized. Then she found it, a faint but undeniable trace that the broadcast had been doctored. Some of the imagery was real, but much of it was fabricated, cleverly stitched together to incite maximum outrage. Worse, the signal source wasn't entirely Zykar. It had been routed through multiple systems, possibly even planted to provoke Earth into war. Morgan raced to the bridge, bursting in mid-strategy session. "Captain Kane, we've been deceived," she exclaimed. Kane turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" "The broadcast. It's not what we thought. It was manipulated, designed to provoke us into attacking. I don't think the Zykar are the masterminds. Someone else is pulling the strings." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Commander Halley broke the tension. Even if that's true, the Zykar are guilty of countless atrocities. This doesn't change what we've seen with our own eyes. Morgan stepped closer to Kane. We've already destroyed countless lives. What if this is exactly what they wanted? What if we've become the monsters they feared? Kane's jaw tightened. Dr. Morgan, we've committed to this path. Turning back now would dishonor those who've already fallen. We have no choice but to finish what we started. The fleet pressed deeper into Zykar space, now targeting the Zykar homeworld itself. The planet was a marvel of architecture and industry, its surface glowing with the light of vast cities. Yet, as the fleet prepared for bombardment, Morgan made a desperate plea to the Accord's leadership. Look at what we've done, she urged during a holographic meeting with Earth's leaders. The Zykar are fighting to survive now, not to conquer. If we destroy their homeworld, we're no better than what we accuse them of being. This isn't justice. It's genocide. Her words sparked fierce debate. Some argued that mercy would make humanity look weak. Others, including a few influential leaders, began to waver. On the Resolute, Kane wrestled with his own demons. He stared at the tactical display, the homeworld's destruction awaiting only his command. His hands clenched into fists as he replayed Morgan's warning in his mind. Captain, the fleet is standing by, Halley said, her voice steady. Kane inhaled deeply. Hold fire, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. A shocked silence filled the bridge. We've proven our strength, Kane continued, his tone firm. But strength without restraint is savagery. Stand down. The order rippled through the fleet. Bombardment protocols were canceled, and humanity's armada withdrew, leaving the Zykar battered but alive. As the Resolute drifted into hyperspace, Morgan sat alone in her lab, her gaze fixed on the stars. The war had been paused, but the scars it left behind ran deep. Somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the true orchestrators of the broadcast watched humanity's retreat, and perhaps they smiled.